that delivers for the whole region, not just part of the region. But I'm very positive that we're moving towards something that can do those things. So the key messages in the report: that Council agreed its participation in the City deal in January of last year. As part of that process, approval of the business plan was a matter reserved to councils, and therefore Cabinet and then Council on the 28th of this month, I believe, will meet to consider the business plan for onward approval. You'll see in the report, I won't go into the background, but that sort of takes you through the process that's been reached to draw up the document itself. I think the document's something that's definitely improved into its current iteration, which I think can be something that drives forward the City deal well. So I'll bring you to the recommendations then at page 20. It's recommended that Cabinet note and make any comments on the business plan and recommend its approval to Council to enable the reserved matter to be discharged. Any comments or questions on this?
Thank you, Leader. Just to say that the City Deal business plan has been broken down into different elements. So there's one around skills, one around housing, and there's one around digital. And the leader is the leader for the digital strand, and myself working with Matt Lewis, the lead chief exec on that. We've got, you can see in the business plan, a digital strategy that's going forward. That's been agreed by the Joint Cabinet, subject to everybody signing off this business plan, the 10 councils. It is really, really, really exciting. I think it's the most exciting strand of the City Deal work. And it could turn us into something very special on a global level in terms of being a smart tech region. The IQE work that we've done is already placed to make us a global leader in terms of the technology that on semiconductors, and that's just the beginning of what we could achieve digitally. So I think it's very, very exciting stuff, and looking forward to working with it. Like anything where you're working in a partnership of 10 local authorities, 10 leaders, 10 chief executives, we have different perspectives, you have to work through those, but I think we've got through that initial team building part of working together, and actually we're ready to achieve some really big things. So it's I fully recommend this report to you. I think it's quite a landmark really in moving forward as a region.
That's very true, and thank you for the work that you've done. I think we're lucky to have both the work you've done and people like Matt Lewis to lead on that digital strand, and I agree. I think it's something that can bring real benefits to the region. And as I say, the point you made at the end I think is important. It's good to pass this milestone so that we can really get on with rolling our sleeves up and making a difference for the region. Anyone else want to comment at this point? If I can move to the recommendations then, which I believe are on page 20 of the report at 9.1. Can I have a show of hands? Thank you. So if we move on then to the supporting people strategy, if I can hand over to Dave Daniels.
Okay, thanks, Leader. So for context, the Supporting People is a Welsh Government grant-funded programme which aims to support people to remain in their own homes and prevent homelessness, and support people who are homeless to get back into a stable lifestyle and a roof above their heads. So this document today is our 3-year strategy for how we're going to deliver that effectively. It sort of outlines the priorities that we're going to take forward, which include mental health, domestic abuse, vulnerable young people, vulnerable families, and preventing homelessness, all sorts of really absolutely crucial core issues that we're having to grapple with as a council. It funds such valuable projects such as local women's refuges, supported living for young people, supported services to keep older people living in their own homes, financial inclusion. There's just a short list of many things that this programme goes towards funding. And on that, if any of my fellow Cabinet members would like to actually visit some of the projects that we're delivering, I've visited a few of them, and you can instantly see the benefit that they have for the people that need them there and then. So that's an open offer to any members who would like to visit. So this strategy, I won't say too much because Rachel's obviously going to elaborate a bit more than I will. But this strategy will be reviewed each year to check it's sort of still effective and still delivering for the needs of today. But, you know, from my perspective, from a political perspective, the needs are the fact that we've got increasing demand, increasingly complex cases coming to us, which require greater resource. So it's frustrating that a lot of this programme is addressing sort of demand, but we really need to be focusing on sort of prevention, which hopefully the funding flexibilities will help free up. But the biggest sort of challenge we're facing really is demand through austerity and welfare reform. So I think I've talked a bit too much, so I'll leave Rachel take over from here.
Thanks, David. Great, thank you. I don't want to cover what David's given a really good introduction into the strategy, but just to tell you a little bit about its development. It was developed through a robust needs assessment, which took into considerable account the views of our stakeholders and people who use the services. We held a number of engagement events throughout the year, and I think sort of Alison, you've attended one previously, which was really great. Again, it's a crucial programme. It provides support to the most vulnerable people in our communities with really complex needs. The strategy does set out our priorities for the coming 3 years, which focus around ensuring that we're meeting the needs of our communities, meeting the needs of those vulnerable people. And as David said, we've identified through that sort of core client groups, which we, through our needs assessment and through our consultation with a wide range of stakeholders and service users, have identified as being sort of need of further development, really. So, yeah. That's it, thank you.
I forgot to give my thanks actually to Rachel and the team for putting this together, because it's quite an extensive document and it's very informative actually. So I just I can't believe I forgot that. But thank you for all the work you've put into it.
Yeah, I think that's worth saying, and thank you to Dave. I think we're lucky to have someone with such a dedication and passion for helping vulnerable people, as Dave has done on this, and many other issues. I think that invitation to visit project is welcome, and more than happy to take you up on that, along with other cabinet members too. I note the challenge you mentioned of trying to address this demand, especially the increasing demand caused by things like universal credit and the bedroom tax and other sort of benefit reforms, whilst trying to move to early intervention and prevention, which is something I know you care greatly about, and we're trying to do as a council, in line with the Future Generations Bill, and in line with the desire we have to help people earlier to both improve outcomes for them and to stem demand on our services. So it's a good report, and I'd like to recommend it to members. Anyone else want to come in at this point? Dave?
Yeah. Just to echo what you said, I've been a bystander in much of what Dave Daniels and his team have been doing, but there certainly is a buzz around that area of our activity now that didn't exist before, and I think much of that is down to the energy, particularly that Dave has brought to the brief, and to the office that supported him in that venture, and well done.
Great, if we move to the recommendations then on page 93, the Cabinet approved the Supporting People strategy. So can I have a show of hands in favour? That's carried, thank you Rachel. If I move on to agenda item 9 now, the Education Achievement Service Business Plan, and hand over to Dave Joel.
I don't intend to go into any great detail here because we have somebody perhaps far more qualified than me to dot I's and cross T's, and I'm sure that he'd be more than happy to do that. That said, the EAS is required under the Welsh Assembly Government's National Model for Regional Working to submit a business plan to WAG that covers a 3-year cycle. This has to be, or the business plan that is, should be updated annually, and this particular document that we have and that we're looking at this morning is the current iteration of that document. The plan focuses on actions required to accelerate and raise improvement for all our learners, and especially those more vulnerable. And there's a whole range of people that fall into that category. But it's worth noting also that the document approaches the other issue of more able pupils, and that's a good sign as well. The delivery model is on a regional basis, and I'm sure that you're all aware of that now, with what we call the annex, that is the bespoke version of the document that fits the bill for every individual authority. The progress towards the business plan and the annex is reported to both the Joint Educational Group and the board of the EAS on a twice-yearly basis, and it's also reported to the scrutiny committees of each individual authority. I was included, of course, and the WAG Challenge Review Committee, as well as the Cabinet Minister herself. So it's pretty well scrutinised, and it's pretty well crawled over for any weaknesses. It should be noted that not all the actions of the business plan will result in instant impact on the end of key stage outcomes. And what we have to bear in mind, and this is a vexed question for some people that I've talked to, and that is the extent to which the EAS are responsible for progress and outcomes. There is a sense where the major function of the EAS is to support and challenge, and teachers, heads of schools, and particularly governors as well, have a part to play in this function. And I think we're making some steady progress in getting people to understand that particular part of the process as well. The business plan is a statutory obligation. The EAS have a statutory duty to produce this and to update it on an annual basis, and we have a duty to perform this function of looking at it through the scrutiny process, and indeed now considering it at cabinet level. The thing that I'm concerned about isn't necessarily the content of the report itself, but there is a timely need here, because the report has to be delivered ultimately by the end of the month. So we need to make our minds up here, because that is a pressing, urgent matter. Having said that, I wasn't going to comment on any of the detail. I think it is worth referring people to paragraph 5.8, because for me, if there are milestones in this document that point the way forward for the EAS, or the way in which the direction of travel of the EAS is going, 5.8 is one of those milestones, and arguably the essence of the document itself, and I'm sure that Julian will pick up on that when he does his presentation. I won't labour the point. There are 7 or 8 points there that combine together to go to the route of continuity, consistency, and these two qualities combine to produce a stability for the education service that is absolutely vital and necessary for progress going forward. And I think that on that basis, the document serves its purpose, and I think that it's a very, very good, sound exposition of where EAS want to be on our behalf. With that, I'll hand over to...
Thank you, David. Well, you've stolen most of my thunder there now, so... I think the important thing is, David's already referred to Section 5.8, Focus for Improvement. It is quite a detailed document, but I think in terms of the context of this document, we're in the whole of Wales in a 5-year transition. As a consequence of successful futures and Donaldson and moving to the brave new world of that, you know, we are bombarded by constant change as local authorities, councils, schools, and it's a way of trying to address the current needs of our children in our schools, and also a way of sort of looking forward and future-proofing the work of our schools as we move forward. So I'm just going to refer to a few points at a quite high level in Section 5.8 that David referred to on page 146. You wouldn't be surprised that for any local authority or any region to be sort of trying to raise the aspirations and improve the outcomes of all pupils, but obviously the most vulnerable, included the more able. It is about supporting schools where we deem progress to be too slow and ensuring that a more consistent approach to the schools causing concern policy. Now, I'm going to come back to that when I mention risks in a moment, but don't be too perturbed from the point of view of Torfaen at that second bullet. I'll clarify that in a moment. It is about sharing best practice, in particular, improving the quality of leadership, teaching and learning, particularly within the secondary phase. As we're all aware, in Torfaen, our primary schools are achieving, in comparison to other schools across Wales, at a higher level than our secondary schools. We know the reasons why. There are detailed plans in place for that, and it's a continuation of that. We're working very intensely with quite a lot of the secondary schools across the region and also in Torfaen. I think the other ones then, the important one, is this move to the new world-class curriculum, as in the national ambition, and also the new accountability measures. Because at the moment they're in a state of flux. We've had new qualifications brought in, new schemes of learning, new specifications, and some of the schools are finding it very difficult to adjust to that. So there's a lot of support in the plan to go into that area. Overall, how are we going to get there? And this is the important thing really that you need to be aware of as a local authority is, over the last 18 months, as a consequence of activities like this and review, we've moved a lot of what was our provision for schools into the core provision. So that's why you'll see the annexes for nearly all local authorities now are quite minimalistic, because everything that was deemed important by ourselves and by local authorities has been shifted into core provision. We felt that it was important that everybody got a consistently good service in terms of the core provision. So you'll see that the annexes are now a lot smaller than they used to be. The other thing you will hear an awful lot of is cluster approach. So secondary schools actually working, not necessarily with other secondary schools, but certainly with their primary feeder schools. Because the big drive, for instance, on skills development is a drive literally from 3 to 18. And clusters working together, so we don't get the fall off in Key Stage 3 that has been historically there, because there is a clear transition in terms of not just well-being, but in terms of teaching and learning, pedagogy and outcomes as well. And the other big change, and the buzzwords that education is absolutely full of, is schools as learning organisations, or basically a self-improving system. And that's schools just being far more acutely aware and able to self-evaluate themselves and come out with an accurate position of where they are, not thinking that they're doing better than they are or better than the school next to them. So it sounds quite straightforward at high level, but there's an awful lot of detail and work that's going on behind that to ensure that that happens. And that's a big challenge for the whole of Wales, not just in Torfaen. On page 134, you will notice that there are some risks listed in there. And this is where I'm going to come back to that and the second bullet point. It is important that you realise that this is a regional document, and some of the risks to the success of this plan involve risks as a consequence of the actions, or sometimes lack of actions, that local authorities take, especially around the schools causing concerns. Now, the use of statutory powers has been an issue for us in other authorities. I want to make it absolutely clear now that in terms of Torfaen, you are exemplary in the working relationship, and I'll compliment David and I'll compliment Dermot as well, and the working relationship between them, myself, Debbie and the rest of the ES regional team. In terms of running the school's risk register and in terms of the schools causing concern, they are the exemplary practice in the region, and other local authorities are trying to change their ways of working to mirror what's happening here. And that's why I'm confident from the point of view of Torfaen, with the secondary schools in particular. We know where they are, but they are on a strong progress journey. We'll know where they'll be in future. So that's testimony to that. So some of those risks in there, while you see LA's not doing that, it's important to realise that it's a regional document. But I wanted to clarify that in the case of Torfaen, it's not the case. It's a bit like two children misbehave in a lesson, so you keep the entire class behind, you know. So really, that's the high-level summary. I don't know if anybody has any questions from that, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? And also, I just wanted to thank you for that report, because it's one of those reports that can sound quite dry, but I recognise a huge amount of work that goes in behind it. Both yourself and Debbie and your team at the AS, David, Dermot and the team in the local authority, and I very much welcome that praise of the relationship I think that David and Dermot have helped build up between ourselves and our schools. I think that's light years ahead of where we were in previous times, and that's due to the good work of David and Dermot and the relationship they've built up with schools. I think that's really reaping rewards. And of course, I think it's right that we praise all the teaching staff in Torvine, because at the end of the day, it's their work that goes into trying to give our kids the best start in life. And I think both David and yourself were right to focus on 5.8 there, because this isn't just a dry business plan. This is about how we work together to give the best possible start in life for our young people. And I think we always need to keep that in mind, both as local residents, councillors and parents in many of our cases. I think you can be assured that will continue to be a priority for us as a council. It's certainly a priority for David in the work he does. Our corporate plan shows that goes through us like a stick of rock too, because it's one of our 3 key corporate priorities in raising the educational attainment. And I look forward to working with Dermot, David and yourselves to further that journey, so thank you. Anyone else want to come in at this point? If I can move you then to the recommendations at 135, 12.1 there, that Cabinet members approve the ES business plan and the local authority annex. Can I have a show of hands in favour? Thank you, that's carried. Thank you. If we move on then to item 10 on information governance. This is a report to approve a range of information governance policies to support and deliver information governance and management across the council. At this point, if I can hand over to Lyndon, who's going to take us through the report.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, Cabinet. The report before you today seeks approval for a range of policies and procedure to both strengthen and support information management and governance across the council, which you would recall was a recommendation from the Wales Audit Office Corporate Assessment, and the recommendations are set out on page 215 of your agenda. For reassurance to Cabinet, processes are in place to develop and oversee progress in this area, and this includes representation for all our service areas on 2 working groups. One is an asset owners group who know their systems very well, and a management group who actually own the data that sits behind those systems. Both groups are chaired by me as the CEO of the authority. In May 2018, we also have the introduction of the General Data Protection Regulations, and our new policies and procedures, if agreed by yourselves this morning, will support compliance to this new legislation. Section 5 of the report provides a précis of each policy document to its content and to whom it applies, including our staff, elected members, contractors, consultants, etc. Consultation has taken place across our group structure, with leadership team and with the trades union in the development of these policies. The policies have been developed within the Information Governance Strategy and Framework and forms the first tranche of the Council's approach to improving this area. Key policies clearly outline our expectations to what is acceptable use across the Council, compliance to our data protection and new GDPR requirements, password protection of our systems and documents, freedom of information, use of social media, together with supporting guides where required. Should Cabinet approve the policies this morning, we do not underestimate the difficulties in embedding such a wide range of policies and practice. We're already working on a communication plan and training to help support that, and we're preparing for this work, which we will include in a member seminar. We're looking for staff drop-in sessions, publication on Swoop, one-page easy reads across the policies because they are quite detailed in places, further CSIRO messaging from me, and support should be required to our departmental SMTs. Reaching where we are today, a huge amount of work has been undertaken by the information governance groups, support from our colleagues within internal audit, and from our internal data protection information team. In closing, Leader, I'd be happy to take any questions and the recommendations set out on page 215.
Okay, thank you very much for that report, Lyndon, and for the huge amount of work that I know you've led on this. It's the kind of issue that often goes unnoticed and unthanked unless things go wrong, in which case it becomes headline news. But we really do appreciate the work and the leadership you've shown in this role and in many others. Anyone else want to come in at this point before we move to the recommendations, which are on page 215, that we approve the following policies, procedures and approve the SORO to commence implementation. There's the Information Governance Policy, the Information Governance Strategy, the Information Governance Management Framework, the Acceptable Use Policy, the Data Protection Policy and Procedures, the Information Access Policy, the Password Policy and Construction Procedure, the Freedom of Information Policy, the Social Media Policy and the Clear Desk Policy. So can I have a show of hands in favour? That's carried. Thank you. And that brings today's meeting to a close. Thank you, members.